to sky. Loud the winds howl, loud the waves roar, thunderclaps rend the air. Baffled our foes stand by the shore, follow they will not dare. Speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry. Carry the lad that's born to be king, over the sea to sky. Many's the lad fought on that day, while the claymore did wield. When the night came, silent they lay, dead on Culloden's field. Speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry. Carry the lad that's born to be king, over the sea to sky. That's our opening song, Speed Bonny Boat, Over the Sea to Sky. And this song has been a long traditional ideal of a famous story from Scotland's Jacobite past. It highlights the daring escape of Bonnie Prince Charlie, and aided by Scottish heroine Flora MacDonald, and many romantic versions and depictions surround the story and the song. Recently it's been used, of course, as the theme for Outlander, the big Jacobite story there as well. But we've been researching this song, and there's a few facts about this song, a traditional song I'm just going to share with you right now. It wasn't written or sung in Jacobite times. A man called Sir Harold Bolton, an Englishman who was interested in Scottish traditional music, who also wrote the Loch Tay boat song, he wrote the words to this song in the 1870s. To a tune which was collected by a woman, and this was Anne Campbell MacLeod. And the tune comes from a traditional Gaelic rowing song, apparently, which in English is The Cuckoo in the Grove. And she heard this song on a trip to Skye. She shared what she called the scrap of chanty. She had this little tune in her head that she'd learned with Bolton and other people, and Bolton then wrote the words, and he introduced the story of Charlie and Flora to what he was writing around this tune. So the whole song, from the tune to the words and the story, was first published in a big volume of music called Songs of the North, and that was published in London in 1884. So this song, Over the Sea to Sky, many versions and recordings over time, lots of people have sung it, but one interesting thing stands out for me when we were researching this song, that a researcher of music found that as the song became a success, and this is in the early period, as it became a success, many folk began to say they remembered it, and they recalled that it had been sung to them as children by their grandparents and had been passed down through the family in the original Old Gaelic. Now that's really interesting, and that's how myths are born. So I like that kind of story, that people would remember it and feel that they've heard it once before. Now in Jacobite songs, the weaving of tradition and history and culture and composition and poetry all comes into what we call folk songs. And this has always been part of our traditional culture, and Scotland is particularly rich in this aspect. And it's what we, as PlaidSong, are going to be exploring in Jacobite songs in these sessions for Soldiers of Killiecrankie. This is what we do. We love to look at the songs, we like to write songs, we like to revisit songs, and we like to look at the history around them. So we're going to look at that for Jacobite songs. True or false. The origins, the stories behind the songs, and the different versions and the words when they were produced and published and lost over time, some of them too. So right up to today, new songs continue to emerge. Historians are always looking at more Jacobite material, things that were read by historians years ago, people that are looking at things now. I do Jacobite history, still do that, and I know lots of people who do. But people even doing their family history, people are always looking for their own Jacobite past, so they come across people in the past themselves. So there's something new to explore all the time. And we're going to look at some songs in later sessions. We're going to do one or two of these little sessions for Soldiers of Killiecrankie, so this is just the first one. The songs on the theme of Jacobitism are among some of the most popular, and many are very commonly known and performed regularly. They can be rousing and patriotic and sentiment, and many actually fall into the category of a romantic, Scotland's romantic past. The recalling of heroic events, battles, people, families and clans, and ultimately many hark back to the myth of maybe a lost golden age, a sense of loss, and missed opportunities, things that can never be regained for Scotland. We love all of that. We love all of that in the history. Many people believe that Jacobite songs were sung at the time of the Jacobite rebellions. In fact, many of the songs we associate with the Jacobite uprisings and rebellions and Jacobite history came after, long after for some of them, this period. And some possibly did have their origins in long-sung old tunes and popular music, but many of the words, the Jacobite words, were put to traditional Scots tunes in a later period. And some of the people best known for writing Jacobite songs were in fact very more collectors of songs and music. The tradition of Scots song was generally one where writers, some serious, some less so, wrote poems or verse on a variety of themes, not just Jacobitism, and then set those words to existing and generally well-known tunes. There's a huge, rich seam of tunes to call upon, varied from fiddle music, bagpipe music, dance music, or just tunes that came to be recorded from the oral tradition. Somebody had heard it and these tunes just can persist over time. You can see this in Robert Burns' collections where his songs have the words listed and then a tune at the top will be suggested for the words. For example, It Was Awful a Right for King has the tune listed as Molly Stewart. That way the reader, if not able to read music, might quickly know how to set the words to the tune. Many songs have different versions. There are more than one. Charlie Is My Darling, just like there's more than one Auld Lang Syne. But we're going to look at songs by Robert Burns, James Hogg, Carolina, Lady Nairn. We're going to look at women in this Jacobite history as well, and among others. So there was some people who were writing words, creating poetry and verse, and they were also maybe collecting tunes and music in the period just after the Jacobite Battle of Culloden, just after that period. From around 1780 onwards, and the big collections of Scots music were created in the late 1700s into the early 1800s. Numerous collections were put together, big published volumes. There was a craze, almost a mania for collecting this kind of music, and lots of it going on then, lots of publishers, all different editions and trying to bring out tunes. It's a very exciting time for music. And that's another thing that historians and researchers go back to, those big volumes. Where does that tune first come out? How many times does it have a different word set to the same tune? Where can you pick the tunes up? So it's very exciting to explore the songs in that way. And that's where a lot of these Jacobite songs are found, as I say, and sometimes you can tell when they first come on the scene because they're not found any earlier in a published way. Having said that, if you're fortunate to do Jacobite history where you look at original documents, letters and journals, you might find the words to songs amongst these things and poems. I've come across that myself in the archives. So we're going to start by looking at the very beginning of the Jacobite uprisings here at Killiecrankie, and one character in particular, Bonnie Dundee, Viscount Graham of Claverhouse. Two notable songs are attributed to this major battle and surrounding events, Killiecrankie and Bonnie Dundee, and both are still sung today with great enthusiasm and gusto, especially at any usual Soldier of Killiecrankie events, and we've been there, haven't we? So,
we have.
So we're going to start with one here. Excuse me while I clear my throat.
To the Lords of Convention 'twas Claverhouse spoke, and the King's crown go down, there are hands to be broke. So each cavalier who loves honour and me, let him follow the bonnets, so Bonnie Dundee. Come fill up my cup, come fill up my can, come saddle my horses and call up my men. Unhook the Westport and let us gae free.
bells to ring, backwards the drums they are beat. But the provost, this man, says we'll just let it be, for the tune is we'll riddle that devil Dundee.
Come fill up my cup, come fill up my can, come saddle my horses and call up my men, unhook the Westport and let us be free. For it's up with the bonnets of bonny Dundee. There are hills beyond Pentland and lands beyond Forth, be the Carns in the south, there are chiefs in the north, there are brave Dunny Wassels 3,000 times 3. Oh hey for the bonnets of bonny Dundee. Come fill up my cup, come fill up my can, come saddle my horses and call up my men, unhook the Westport and let us get free. For it's up with the bonnets of bonny Dundee. Then away to the hills, eh, the Lee and the Ross, and I own a year's supper all crutch with the foss. So tremble, false wicks, in the midst of your glee, for you've not seen the last of my bonnets and me. Come fill up my cup, come fill up my can, come saddle my horses and call up my men, unhook the Westport and let us get free. For it's up with the bonnets of bonny Dundee.
There we go. Wound us up there. So that's Bonnie Dundee. Now, many of you will be following Soldiers of Killiecrankie and the recent posts and videos on the battle site, giving the history of the battle itself at Killiecrankie. So hopefully you're familiar with Bonnie Dundee. The song was written by Sir Walter Scott in 1825. So again, this is after Culloden, who recalled the actions of John Graham of Claverhouse, sometimes called Bloody Clavers, and often referred to as Bonnie Dundee. It was set to a much older tune, which actually was about the town of Dundee and not about Graham of Claverhouse at all. Scott knew the tune well and used it to match his words. This tune, the old tune, was originally used maybe 10, 15 times in different songs, and this is very common. People often knew a tune and then they only had to learn new words, and this all helped with making new songs popular, because if you used a tune everyone knew, there was more chance of people remembering it and singing it. Words would be printed out for people and not always the music, so just a line at the top to say which tune or air the words matched. The original song was, as many early songs were, quite coarse actually, and seems to be about a young person making his escape from Dundee, a young woman looking for someone that she'd met between St Johnstone, Perth, and Dundee. And the title for this old tune was Jockey's Deliverance, or The Valiant Escape from Dundee, to be sung to an excellent tune called Bonnie Dundee. And this was published in 1719, so it's quite an early tune. The title in 1719 was Jockey's Escape from Dundee, with a wee comma there, and the parson's daughter whom he had mowed. So there's something going on there, and I'll let you find that out for yourself. But the chorus featured variations on Come Open the Gates and Let Me Go Free and Show Me the Way to Bonnie Dundee. So it's about the town and it's about some goings on between Perth and Dundee, which is great. So this tune has been around for a long time, and then along comes Sir Walter Scott. He was very interested in the story of Graham of Claverhouse, and he wrote about this in his novel Old Mortality in 1819. But it wasn't until 1825 that he wrote the poem, the verses about Claverhouse, to the tune of Bonnie Dundee. Despairing of carrying the vote, the Lords of Convention, I should say, was, this song is what it refers to the Lords of Convention. And this was an attempt by Dundee to sway the convention called by William III in March 1689 in Edinburgh to ratify his succession to the throne of Scotland. They thought that if they ratified the succession, then that would be accepted and James would have gone. So Dundee despaired of carrying the vote and afraid of an attempt on his life, he rode off at the head of around 50 mounted followers, causing great consternation among people in Edinburgh. His departure had the effect of causing many who favoured his view to also withdraw from the Parliament, and thus those who favoured William were left in the Parliament, the convention, without opposition. Meanwhile, Dundee withdrew, he headed north, he raised King James's banner on Dundee Law, and he set about gathering an army in the Highlands. Scott sent a copy of the verses to his daughter-in-law, Jane, mentioning that his great-grandfather had been among Claverhouse's followers. So here's personal family history getting into this here as well now. Scott's been doing his own history, and he describes his great-grandfather as a most incorrigible Jacobite, so that's quite interesting as well. And this might explain his interest in the period and the story also. At 11 verses, Scott also thought it was too long, probably right there. But the longer versions are often interesting to read, useful to read, because they mention other people and other players. Montrose gets a mention in there and all sorts of other history. And there's some Covenanting history here that's going on, which Scott's also interested in. So the longer version of this song is quite interesting to read, and if you're interested, go and look it up and see what else is mentioned there, because it's a good story. And the tune was used, obviously, but the tune itself continues to be used by various regiments as a marching song. So the tune gets used again in different ways, as well as for the song that we know. Do the songs tell us what we need to know about Graham of Claverhouse and the battle, or anything really about his real history and his death? Do they make him sound like a heroic figure who led the first Jacobite rebellion? And do they also work well in perpetuating this story? A good song can become so popular that it keeps the story alive and it keeps us interested in the history, we hope. Sometimes, though, we just accept the song and then we don't always think too much about who wrote it or what it's really about. And kind of, sometimes you get caught up in repeating a song or singing it at a ceilidh or a party, and you don't always think of the words. And we sometimes maybe need to think a wee bit more deeply about that when you don't know quite what a song's about. Have a wee think. The old oral tradition, very common in Scotland, was of ballads, long ballads, and this was originally a very early way to repeat stories, to keep them alive and to make things known to a wider audience. In the days before everyone could read or follow written news, a song worked to convey something of interest and to educate and inform, as well as entertain. So you can say that songs still do that today, obviously, but in those days they were about telling a very long story and making sure that something was kept alive in the cultural side of things. So given the longevity and the ongoing popularity of this song, it's clearly been an excellent vehicle for perpetuating the events of 1689, even if glorifying bloody Clavers more than he perhaps deserves. So that's one song, Bonnie Dundee, dealing with that character, and lots of other good stories about Dundee as well. But we're going to move on here to our next song. Now, Robert Burns wrote our next song, and it's one that is also a rousing crowd pleaser in many ceilidhs and gatherings. And in actual fact, Sid and I don't always sing these songs very often. We tend to sing them when we're at bigger gatherings and the crowd gets going and people are enjoying themselves. But they're good fun all the same. Happy memories of singing it, Killiecrankie, Burns suppers and ceilidhs and parties as well. So this one is, I think, this is the Soldier of Killiecrankie theme song, I would imagine. Killiecrankie. Whar hae ye been sae braw, lad? Whar hae ye been sae brankie, ho? Whar hae ye been sae braw, lad? Come ye by Killiecrankie, ho? And ye hae been for I hae been, ya wouldna be sae canty, ho? And if ye had seen what I hae seen on the braes o' Killiecrankie, ho,
ye had seen what I had seen on the braes o' Killiecrankie, the malt pit car fell in a fire, and clavers got a clanky ho. Or I had fed on Athelred on the braes o' Killiecrankie ho. And if ye had been what I had been, you wouldna be sae canty ho. And if ye had seen what I had seen on the braes o' Killiecrankie ho. Oh, fie, Mackay, what gart ye lie in the bush o' yonder the Brankie ho? You'd better his king ways look than come to Killiecrankie ho. And if ye had been what I had been, you wouldna be sae canty ho. And if ye had seen what I had seen on the braes o' Killiecrankie ho. It's nae shame, it's nae shame, there's nae shame to Swankie ho. There's sore sleighs on Athol braes, and the deals at Killiecrankie ho. And if ye had been what I had been, you wouldna be sae canty ho. And if ye had seen what I had seen on the braes o' Killiecrankie ho.
We've sung that, as I say, at a few ceilidhs and in evenings, and it's great when you sing a song and you know the place as well. You get that real sense of how it all comes together and what they're singing about. Some great words and all kinds of things in there. Historians of the music say that the chorus is certainly old. The rest of it, beginning "Whar hae ye been, say braw lad," was published in 1789 by Robert Burns, and this is probably based on his Highland tour when he passed through Killiecrankie. Burns was actually at Killiecrankie himself in August of 1787. He had a big tour and he met all sorts of people, Murrays of Athol and whatnot, so he's very influenced by this. Killiecrankie is a Gaelic word for aspen wood and is the mountain pass, as you'll all know, beyond Athol and Pitlochry, and the scene of the battle with Claverhouse, Bonnie Dundee from our earlier song. Coming from Inverness over the Corriarrick and Dramochter passes, he'd raided Perth in May, and he ambushed the government forces of 4,000 men at the pass of Killiecrankie. Although they outnumbered his own forces 2-1. The Highlanders charged, routing the government forces, but in victory Graham had been mortally wounded. He had directed the battle, learning of his victory, but died soon after. The Jacobites had no leader capable of replacing him and were stymied at the Battle of Dunkeld later that summer. And the first Jacobite uprising ended in defeat at Cromdale in May 1690, so it's just a short period really. There's some names and facts mentioned in the song, and some great words and things. I fought at land, I fought at sea, at hame I fought my auntie. Well, that's a bit of a mockery here. They're mocking what goes on with the government battle. Bald Pitcur fell in a fir. That's Halliburton of Pitcur fighting on Dundee side. He fell in a drainage ditch apparently. Fie Mackay, what gart ye lie? And this is General Hugh Mackay. He was the commander-in-chief of the Williamite forces in Scotland, and he was the one who obviously marched against Bonnie Dundee. His forces largely came from the lowlands, but included professional Highland soldiers as well. And this is Scots against Scots in lots of ways. There are English and other regiments there, and you'll have looked at this history with James, I'm sure, and Rollion, but this is actually a significant battle between Scots And of course the famous Highland Charge, which was the way of winning the battle, which is again referred to in the song Where Hae Ye Been Sae Brolad. So it's a great song, and it's a great anthem, if you like, for all that goes on at Killiecrankie. So we've looked at one or two songs, and we're going to finish up in this wee session today with one more song, which we thought we'd better even up the balance a little bit here on both sides. So we're going to sing a song supporting the point of view of the Whigs, the traditional rivals and enemies of the Jacobites. And this is an old tune which has been used again for a number of songs. It's our favourite for My Loves in Germany, which is a lovely song, again about those professional soldiers, those mercenaries, and again Scots are famous for that, so that song relates to that. But the original words is this is Ye Jacobites by name, and this apparently emerged around events from the Battle of Falkirk in 1746. And these words were actually given out around that time as an excellent new song on the Jacobites and the oppression of the rebels. That was what they were headlined with. And this is to the tune of Captain Kidd, which is another song. So people knew this tune, and these were the words they got at the time. And Robert Burns rewrote it around 1791, and that's probably the version that we generally know today. Ye Jacobites by name, lend an ear, lend an ear. Ye Jacobites by name, lend an ear. Ye Jacobites by name, your faults I will proclaim. Your doctrines I'm unblame, you shall hear, you shall hear. Your doctrines I'm unblame, you shall hear. What is right and what is wrong by the law, by the law. What is right and what is wrong by the law. What is right and what is wrong, a short sword or a long, a weak arm and a strong for to draw, for to draw. A weak arm and a strong for to draw. Ye Jacobites by name, lend an ear, lend an ear. Ye Jacobites by name, lend an ear. Ye Jacobites by name, your faults I will proclaim. Your doctrines I unblame, you shall hear, you shall hear. Your doctrines I unblame, you shall hear. What makes heroic strife fade afar, fade afar? What makes heroic strife fade afar? What makes heroic strife to whet assassin's knife, or hunt a parent's life with bloody war, bloody war, or hunt a parent's life with bloody war?
Ye Jacobites by name, lend an ear, lend an ear.
Ye Jacobites by name, lend an ear. Ye Jacobites by name, your faults I will proclaim. Your doctrines I unblame, you shall hear, you shall hear. Your doctrines I unblame, you shall hear. Then leave your schemes alone in the state, in the state. Then leave your schemes alone in the state. Then leave your schemes alone, adore the rising sun, and leave a man alone to his fate, to his fate, and leave a man alone to his fate. Ye Jacobites by name, lend an ear, lend an ear. Ye Jacobites by name, lend an ear. Ye Jacobites by name, your faults I will proclaim. Your doctrines I unblame, you shall hear, you shall hear. Your doctrines I unblame, you shall hear. You shall hear. So I hope we've given you a wee taste of at least 2 or 3 Jacobite songs. There's several more to come in various episodes that we'll carry on doing with Soldiers of Killiecrankie. If you're watching this and you've got queries and questions, fire them up and we'll see what's happening and see if we can answer things as we go along, and keep doing your research, and any requests for songs, we'll try and do our best. But
And PlaidSong.
Website. Look at our website if you're looking for more songs and other information on us. We've got a website, we've got a Facebook page, and you'll get links to all of that through the Soldiers of Killiecrankie. Thanks for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time.